This will be a harvest tour on some of my fruit trees that are producing fruit in my backyard orchard. I'll start with this one here. This is my Pakistan mulberry. I bought this tree about 3 years ago. It produced a small crop last year, but this year it put on a pretty good crop that was much bigger. I started picking fruit off of it in mid-April. And as you can see, there's still some fruit that's on the tree that's ready for harvest. And it also has quite a bit that's at the very early stages of development, like these here. There's several of them that are scattered throughout the tree. So it's still producing fruit. So far this year's harvest has not been a disappointment at all. I've been really happy with the production. The fruit is good size and it has excellent flavor. And unlike my Pakistan mulberry, this next one here is my starfruit tree, which has not been doing well. I bought this one about 5 years ago, and I transplanted it about a year ago. I'm not sure what's going on with this one. It's lost the majority of its leaves, but I don't think it's from transplant shock. Every winter it loses leaves, and these trees are highly susceptible to chlorosis, which is basically a condition where the leaves turn yellow and drop due to an iron deficiency. Fortunately, it's a condition that's easily corrected by applying chelated iron, which I've already done a couple of times on this tree, but it hasn't fully recovered. It has a few leaves that are starting to develop, but the recovery has been very slow. I'll have to keep a close eye on this one. Next is my Hass avocado. This one was also purchased about 5 years ago, and last season I did get a good amount of avocados off of it. Unfortunately, this season won't be anywhere near as productive. Last season, when it was in bloom, I sprayed it with a water and honey mixture in order to attract bees for pollination. This season, when it bloomed, I left it alone. It produced a very good amount of blooms, but unfortunately, nearly all the blooms failed to set any fruit. There's only a couple of them. Here's one that managed to set. There's another one somewhere on the tree, but yeah, I can assure you that next season I will definitely be spraying it with a honey water mixture so that I get better pollination. Here's the other avocado that set. It doesn't look quite as healthy, so I'm not sure that one's gonna stay on the tree. But lesson learned. This next one here is my Jujube that has put on a good amount of flower buds. This is the long variety. It's spelled Lang, but it's pronounced long. Last season, I got a really good size harvest off this, and another Jujube that I have for cross-pollination. I'll show you that one in a bit. These trees are fast growing, and I was a bit concerned that they wouldn't do well growing in a container, but they are both doing really well. I bought my Jujubes in January of 2020, and neither produced any fruit the first season, but They did really well their second season. This one here is the Lee, and it also has quite a bit of flower buds on there, so I should get a pretty good crop off of these trees again. And here next to the Jujube is my Australian finger lime. It's recovered from some wind damage, and it's even managed to put on some finger limes, which are just about ready to be picked. I usually wait till they turn this color here, which is, you can't really tell on camera, but it's a brownish color. They go from green to brown, and as soon as they turn color, that's when I usually pick them. And it's also, as you can see here, it's also developing some flower buds. Next are my Emperor lychee trees. I bought these 3 years ago, and they were planted here in the ground nearly 2 years ago. Last season was the first time I got a harvest off of these. The smaller one on the right only managed to set a one last season, but as you can see this time around it's doing much better and has quite a few blooms on it. This other one here was the one that produced quite a bit. Memory serves me right, it's somewhere around 20 to 25. And it looks like it's going to do well this season. I'm not sure what's going on with these leaves here. They're a bit deformed. I'm probably going to have to come back and do a little bit of research on this to see what it's going on and maybe give it some kind of treatment, but I won't do anything until I get a harvest off of it. I don't want to interfere with its fruit production. And this one here, this is my Longan, Kohala Longan. And I bought this one last year, and this is the first time that has developed flower buds. There's a fair amount of panicles and several flowers, so hopefully it'll set some fruit. I've never tried this variety, so hopefully I'll get to sample it this season. And next is my Lolita Serenum cherry tree. I bought this tree about 3 years ago, but I didn't put it in the ground until April of last year. And this one went through a little bit of transplant shock, and then sometime around November it lost several leaves due to cooler temps. Even so, it managed to put on a heavy set of blooms. Here's a quick video of what it looked like when it was in full bloom. And as you can see, it had a heavy set of flowers, and there were very few leaves on the tree. I was worried that it wouldn't set any fruit due to lack of leaves, but it did manage to do well and set a good amount of fruit. I've been harvesting off of it for several weeks now, and it's still producing some fruit. And here are some of my fig trees. These were planted about 2 years ago. This one here is an Excel fig, and it has a few figs on it that are just about ready to be picked. There's a few in the back there. That one on the right looks like it's already ready to be harvested. And it also has several others that are the very early stages of development. This next one right here, this tree here, this one is my Peter's honey. Of all the fig trees I have, this is the one that's put on the most growth and is the most productive. I've been really happy with the amount of figs off this tree. Just has quite a bit of figs that are at the early stages of development, as you can see here. So you should get a good harvest off of this one. This last one here on the end, this is a blackjack fig. It hasn't put on as much growth, but it does produce a fair amount of fruit. And they're at the very early stages of development. I also have some cuttings from all three of these varieties that I just showed you. These were taken off cuttings after I pruned my figs last season. They're all doing well and have put on good growth and are even producing, starting to develop some figs. Here's another one that's also doing well. And there's a few more here. And I have one more that's over here tucked in the corner. Right over here. This one here, and it's also doing well. And here are my cherry trees. These were planted just over 2 years ago. There's 2 trees under that net, a mini royal and a royal Lee. I covered them with that net because last season the birds got nearly all the cherries. It produced it wasn't that big of a crop last season, but it did produce some, and I didn't really get to sample very many because the birds got most of them. So this season, it's a much bigger harvest. It's the biggest harvest it's ever had, and it's doing extremely well. So I went ahead and covered it up so that the birds wouldn't get to them. The cherries are excellent in flavor and really good size. So I'm really happy with the production off of these. And here's my Grumichama. This one was also planted just over 2 years ago. It managed to put on a small crop, which I started to harvest in mid-March. And it still has a few on the tree that are ready to be picked, and it also has some smaller ones that are still in the development stages. Here's a couple more that are almost ready. They need to turn to a really dark color before they're ready to be picked. These here are still quite a ways from being ready. And there's not very many left on there. It's pretty much approached the end of its fruiting cycle. And next is my papaya. I'm not sure what variety this one is. It was a gift, so I couldn't tell you. Papayas you see here, these started to set back in early September, so it's been about seven months now, and they're still don't appear to be ready to be picked. From research I've done, you're supposed to wait until they start to turn a shade of yellow. And I have another papaya, different variety, or a red lady variety that I recently harvested fruit off of. And that one, it took about 8 months to reach maturity. So hopefully it won't be too much longer for these to be harvested. And here's my Little Miss Figgy fig tree. I bought this one about 6 years ago. It was a really small tree when I bought it. It was only standing about 7 inches tall. And for the past several years, I've up-potted it several times up to the pot you see it in here now, which is a 15-gallon container. And hopefully this season when it goes dormant, I'll be able to finally put it in the ground. I was supposed to do it last season, but I just couldn't find the time. So hopefully this season I'll be able to finally plant it in the ground. And this is my Celeste fig tree. This variety seems to do very well in containers. As you can see here, it's putting on a really good sized crop. Just about every branch has several figs that are developing on it. And for the past few seasons, it's done extremely well. I'm really happy with the amount of figs I get off of this, considering, that it's not a very big tree, and the fact that it's growing in a container, it's done extremely well. I'm very pleased with this one. This other one that I have growing here in the same size container that the Celeste is in is a Black Mission. This one has not done as well. It produces really small amount of figs, and it hasn't branched out how I had hoped. The figs are excellent size, the few that it does produce, and excellent in flavor, but it just haven't been able to get a good harvest off of it. And here in this section are my stone fruit trees. The one you see there with all the fruit on it, that's a 4-on-1 peach tree. And all of these trees were planted within a month or so of each other, and they've been in the ground for just over 2 years now. And last season I promised myself that I would thin it out, do a better job of thinning it out, and as you can see, I didn't. I allowed way too many peaches to set. There were a couple of days where I went out there and I did some pretty heavy thinning, but these just produced so many peaches. It's hard to keep up with the thinning. But hopefully next season I'll do a better job. And this one here is another 4-on-1 peach tree that I have growing in a 20-gallon grow bag. And this is usually the first one to start setting fruit, and the majority of the fruit has already been picked. I did a pretty poor job of thinning this one as well. It managed to set over, must have been over 40 or 50, somewhere around there, which is way too much for a tree that small. And here in this group I have Aprium that's in the front, and then the 2 trees in the back. Those are both apricot trees. This one here, the cotton candy Aprium, last season I didn't get very many off of it, but this season it managed to set quite a bit of fruit on it. This other one here next to it is a Katy apricot. Last season I didn't get anything, and this season didn't produce any at all. So not sure what's going on with this one. Maybe it needs a little bit more time to get acclimated to my area, but no fruit off of it again. There's one that's in the back that's a bit hard to see from this angle, which is a Blenheim apricot. And last season, here's a better view. Last season it didn't produce that many either, but this season, as you can see, there's quite a bit. These right here are actually off the Aprium, but you can see in the background there some of the Blenheim fruit set. So both the Aprium and the Blenheim managed to set a really good size crop. So Should have plenty of apricots this season. And here are my pink Barbie guavas. There's 2 trees in here, and these were planted last year, and they put on a good crop last season, and here you can see they're put on a good amount of flower buds, some of which are just about ready to bloom. This one does really well. It's put on a lot of growth, and I'm sure it'll set quite a bit of fruit on it. And next to it here, this is my Eureka lemon tree. It was also planted in the ground last year, and I didn't get much of a crop last season, but now that it's been in the ground for a year, as you can see, it's put on a pretty good amount. This is the most this tree has ever produced. It's doing well. And here's my real red grapefruit tree. This is a dwarf variety. This one bloomed in early March, but it didn't set any fruit. The ones you see here were from a previous bloom, and these are just about ready to be harvested. It has a few on there, and the majority are ready to be picked. I'm not sure why it didn't set any fruit off of its last set of blooms. It may have been transplant shock or just didn't get properly pollinated. It was still pretty cold in March and there weren't that many bees around, so that might be part of the reason. And here's my Meyer lemon tree. Several weeks ago, back in late April, I wound up pruning this one. All this you see here is new growth. Before I pruned it, this side was pretty much bare, and there was a branch on the other side that was starting to take over and becoming the dominant leader. So I went ahead and pruned it. And I cut it back quite a bit. I was a bit worried I may have gone too much, but as you can see, it bounced back, so it's got a lot better shape to it now. And here is my Hawaiian white guava. This one's about 2.5 years old, and I've never harvested any fruit off of it, but this season it's producing some flower buds, so hopefully I'll get a chance to get a crop off of it this season. It's got a fair amount of flower buds. The tree's not very big, but it's got a good amount of flower buds on it. And right here, this is my ice cream banana plant. Hard to believe that less than 3 years ago there was only one small plant that was here, and that one matured and put off all these pups you see here. The original mother plant set some fruit last season, so after I harvested the fruit I cut it down, and now this pup here, as you can see, has put on a pretty good amount. And a second pup, this one here, just a few weeks ago started to flower as well. So it's going to be quite a bit of bananas this season. And here's my Dorset golden apple tree. This one's been in the ground for about a year and a half now. And it's put on a pretty good size crop for a tree that doesn't have all that much branching on it. This one here, this is a pretty good size one. The others aren't about medium-sized apples, but they're very good in flavor. And here's another guava that I have growing in a container. This one's just over 3 years old. It was a volunteer that was taken from a tree from my mother's property, and we're not sure what variety it is. I believe it's a Mexican white guava, but it does have some flower buds, so hopefully this will be the first time that it fruits. So hopefully if we get any fruit to say, we'll be able to figure out what type of what variety this guava is. Well, that'll be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Now that things are starting to come alive in the orchard and I'm getting a lot more fruit production, I'll be posting videos on a regular basis. So if you'd like to follow along, please consider subscribing. And as always, stay safe, grow your own, and thank you for watching.